Joining us live on the line from Massachusetts in the United States is someone who doesn't need any introduction. Professor Noam Chomsky joins us live. Professor Chomsky, well, I suppose we better start with Pakistan. The White House not commenting on the killing of all these people, and well, Richard Holbrooke, someone who you've written about in the context of Yugoslavia, is the man Obama has chosen to solve the situation.
Well, it was pretty clear that Obama would accept the Bush doctrine that the United States can bomb Pakistan freely, and there have been many cases which are quite serious. There has been, for example, a great deal of chaos and fighting in Bajaur province, which is adjacent to Pakistan, to Afghanistan, and tribal leaders and others there have traced it to a bombing of a madrasa school, which killed 80 to 85 people, which I don't think was even reported in the United States. It was reported in the Pakistani press, of course, and the author of the article reporting it, a well-known dissident nuclear physicist, Pervez Budboy, pointed out at the time that this kind of massacre will, of course, engender terror and reactions which will even threaten the state of Pakistan. And that's been what's happening. We're now seeing more of it. The first message of the Pakistani government to General Petraeus, the American general, when he took command of the region, was that they did not want any more bombings in Pakistan. Actually, the first message to the new administration, to the Obama administration, by President Karzai of Afghanistan was the same. He said he wanted to stop bombings of civilians in Afghanistan, which of course continues. He also said that he wants to have a timetable for withdrawal of foreign troops, U.S. and other troops from Afghanistan. That was, of course, just ignored.
And these three foreign envoys, well, the third one hasn't been announced yet, perhaps, but some people expressing optimism about George Mitchell's position as Middle East envoy. And as I was saying, Richard Holbrooke, who you have looked at, I mean, we've talked to the former Bosnian foreign minister here, who seemed to imply that he may even had a role in the say-so for the Srebrenica massacre. And of course, Dennis Ross talked about as an envoy for Iran.
Well, Holbrooke has a pretty awful record, not so much in Yugoslavia as earlier. For example, in the Indonesian atrocities in East Timor, where he was official in charge and evaded any effort to stop the U.S. support for them. And altogether, it's a very spotty record. George Mitchell is, of the various appointments that have been made, I think he's the least, I don't know, maybe the most decent, let's say. He has a pretty decent record. He did achieve something in Northern Ireland, but of course in that case there was an objective. The objective was the British would put an end to the resort to violence in response to IRA terror, and would attend to the legitimate grievances that were the source of the terror. And he did manage that. Britain did pay attention to the grievances, and the terror stopped. So that was successful. But there's no such outcome sketched in the Middle East, especially the Israel-Palestine problem. I mean, there is a solution, a straightforward solution, very similar to the British one. Israel could stop its U.S.-backed crimes in the occupied territories, and then presumably the reaction to them would stop. But that's not on the agenda. In fact, President Obama had just had a press conference, which was quite interesting in that respect. He praised the Arab League peace initiative, the Saudi initiative, which is endorsed by the Arab League, and he said it had constructive elements, for normalization of relations with Israel, and he called on the Arab states to proceed with those constructive elements, namely normalization of relations. But that's a gross falsification of the Arab League Initiative. The Arab League Initiative called for accepting a two-state settlement on the international border, which has been the long-standing international consensus, and said if that can be achieved, then the Arab states should normalize relations with Israel. Well, Obama skipped the first part, the crucial part, the core of the resolution, because that imposes an obligation on the United States. The United States has stood alone for over 30 years in blocking this international consensus. By now, it's totally isolated, the U.S. and Israel. Europe accepted it, non-aligned countries accept it, Hamas has accepted it for years, Palestinian Authority, of course, the Arab League now for many years. It's the U.S. and Israel that block it, not just in words. They're blocking it in actions constantly, happening every day on the occupied territories and also in the siege of Gaza and other atrocities there. So when he skips that, it's purposeful. That entails that the U.S. is not going to join the world in seeking to implement a diplomatic settlement. And if that's the case, Mitchell's mission is essentially vacuous.
Is there a contradiction in that George Mitchell, of course, did speak to members of Sinn Féin, their military wing, of course, the IRA, but at the same time, well, on this channel we've been covering the Gaza conflict, Press TV, the channel, this channel, its bureau was bombed, and now we hear that Israeli soldiers will not give their names, and the names of people are not going to be released for fear of prosecution, and yet some were saying that Obama did say that the borders should be open. Should we see any change in policy because of that?
He did say that, but he didn't mention the fact that that was in the context of a lot of other demands. And of course, Israel will also say, sure, the border should be open if you do everything we want. But he still refuses to speak to the elected government, quite different from Mitchell in Northern Ireland. It means Palestinians still have to be punished for voting in a free election the way the U.S. didn't want them to. And he endorsed the Condoleezza Rice-Tzipi Livni agreement to close the Egyptian-Gaza border, which is quite an act of imperial arrogance. It's not their border. And in fact, Egypt strongly objected to that. But Obama continued, and he says, yes, we have to make sure that no arms are smuggled into the Gaza Strip. But he said nothing about the vast vastly far more lethal arms to Israel. In fact, right in the middle of the Gaza attack, December 31st, the Pentagon announced that it was commissioning a German ship to send, I think they said, 3,000 tons of war material to Israel right in the middle of the attack. That didn't work out because the government of Greece prevented it, but it was supposed to go from Greece, but it'll go from somewhere else. This is right in the middle of the attack on Gaza. Actually, there was very little reporting, a few inquiries, and the Pentagon responded in an interesting way. They said, well, this material won't be used for the attack on Gaza. In fact, they surely knew that Israel had planned to stop the attack right before the inauguration so that Obama wouldn't have to say anything about it. But he said that the Pentagon said that this material is being used for pre-positioning for U.S. forces. In other words, going on for a long time, but this is extending, reinforcing the role of Israel as a military base for the United States on the edge of the major oil-producing regions of the world. If they're ever asked why they're doing it, they'll say, for defense or stability, but it's as a base for further aggressive action.